Hi, Arizona. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, Cora.
I'm sure that most of our listeners probably know a bit about you, but I'd love for you to give us a little bit of a background and an introduction in your own words, and also maybe just sort of talk a little bit about whether or not the natural world and sort of this passion for sustainability has always been a part of your life, or if it sort of emerged more as you got older.
Yeah. So I am a model in the fashion industry, and I've been a model for 10 years now. And it was about 5 years into my career that I realized I had no idea where these clothes that I was working in were coming from and who made them and what the materials were. And that was the beginning for me of my sustainability journey. Everyone has a journey because you can't learn all this stuff overnight, and you can't take a course in everything to do with sustainability. It's a real journey, and you get on the train at some point and you go, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I want to know everything about sustainability. It's so fascinating, and it's changed my life. So I started by looking at materials, reading the labels on the garments, and doing some research, like what is organic cotton and what is conventional cotton, and what is lyocell, and what are all those things, and where do they come from? And then it just led me down this journey that actually took me to agriculture, because most of fashion is grown. And when you start learning about cotton and the difference between conventional cotton and organic cotton, it kind of it opens up this whole world of like, oh wow, there's the whole section of the whole world that's used for agriculture. It's about 40% of the terrestrial land of Earth's surface is farmed. So that's an enormous amount of land that is farmed. And then that can be farmed in a really healthy way that's actually helping to rejuvenate the planet and regenerate soil. Or it can be farmed in a way that is completely destroying nature and the world, not just on the plot of land that is being farmed, but also because water runs through that land, it'll run off the land, carrying with it all the chemicals that was used on that farm. And farming is actually a very chemically heavy industry. It turns out it's not like those kind of picturesque red barn with the cows and the white fence that we all think of, and that's put on the cartons of milk that we buy. And that is not reality. All the children's storybooks that have like a farmyard with some chickens running around, that is not what farms look like anymore. And that's really sad. And so this is the whole journey that I've been learning about, is what kind of farming is good. And the answer I've come to is that biodynamic farming is the most incredible type of agriculture. When you grow something using biodynamic methods, you are actually healing the soil underneath the farm. You're making it rich and thick and alive. Soil is supposed to have billions and trillions of microbes living in it. Some of them are so mini we'll never ever even see them, but some of them are quite big, like worms. You need a lot of worms in soil. You need a lot of insects in soil. It's like, it should be full of life. If you like dig down a bit in soil and it's all dry and clay and caked together, and you can see that there's no air in it and it's just thick and dense, that's really unhealthy, dead soil. And what soil should look like is you should be able to dig down it quite easily. There should be root growth everywhere, and going really deep down root growth, and also just insects like coming out of it everywhere, and air pockets and lightness. And it should be kind of fluffy, like I guess the difference between like a cake that didn't rise and a lovely fluffy sponge cake.
That's a really good analogy, actually.
Turns out I love soil. Who would have known? If you'd asked me 6 years ago, do you have any kind of affinity toward like dirt? I'd be like, no, I don't really like it. It's kind of dirty. And I prefer cities where there isn't any. And now I've just completely changed that through this intellectual journey, weirdly. Like, I'm now desperate to spend more time in soil. And then also I read this amazing book called The Nature Fix. And that book just really lays out all the science behind why nature is good for our brains and even our biology, our physiology. Like our bodies are healthier and our minds are healthier when we are experiencing nature, whether that's looking at nature through a window, even that helps. And this book is amazing. The author goes and visits all the scientists around the world who are studying this and explains why it's really, really important. And soil, when we get our hands in soil and when we smell soil, it actually increases the serotonin in our brains and makes us feel happier. Like, how cool is that?
That is, at a time, I feel like there are so many mental health issues and there's so many things going around. It's funny how I feel like there's sort of this subsect of therapy that's starting to talk about the fact that we need nature and it's hugely important, but it's still not a mainstream approach to keeping well, even though it's essentially free and very easily achieved as long as you kind of have access to nature. And
right now, we can talk about the access to nature, because right now there's a really unusual situation happening. As we know, we are living during the era of COVID-19, which has hit us all by surprise and has changed lives across the planet. And I am one of the lucky ones whose life has not changed that much. I'm reading the news every day to make sure that I am aware of what's going on for most of the population, which is that a true tragedy is unfolding along. Most of the reading I'm doing is along the fashion supply chain, and it's horrific what's happening. There's loss of jobs is horrendous, and that means loss of everything. People are really, really suffering right now. And farms are suffering because farms require lots of people to plant the plants, to plant the seeds, but also to weed them and then to harvest them. And so right now in the UK anyway, but I think in lots of other countries as well, there needs to be a big movement of citizens from cities going out to farms, volunteering their time to harvest. So this is an amazing way that you can go with your family. I highly recommend this with kids. I love taking my kids to farms to volunteer. We get to spend the day outside in the rain or in the sun, and you just sweat and you feel so good afterwards. Whatever it was like, you're just like, whoa, this was a life-changing experience. I also find that, that feeling after you've been on a boat all day and you go to sleep and you're kind of rocking in your bed. So I've been having that feeling, but not with rocking and water, but with like plants are in my visual memory as I fall asleep, because I'm so near them all day and I'm weeding. And so I'm like tearing out these roots and grass roots and finding like these baby strawberry plants that need to see the sun again because they've been overcrowded with grasses and nettles. And it's amazing. I love it so much. And I'm listening to Yuval Harari's Sapiens as I do it as an audiobook. And it's just the best time of my day. I love it so much.
Totally.
And I'm going to bed with these images of weeding and like plants. And I think this is so strong and so health giving. This must be having such a positive impact on my well-being, which also makes me think, what do I normally go to bed with images of? Like my phone and cement streets and tarmac and cars, and how that must be having an impact on my mental health as well, living in a city, just from purely the visual images that are imprinting themselves on my brain, obviously, because they're there. So it's just been interesting thinking about that. But going back to farms, I'm digressing.
No.
You can volunteer on farms. They need your help.
Yeah, it's so true. And just really quickly, Arizona, going back to it, do you feel like are you happier living on the farm? Like, do you feel more grounded or more stable, or like how has it transformed? Obviously, like your sleep's a lot better, but would you say for you and also your family, because you're watching them have this experience alongside you? I know your baby girl's probably maybe a bit young, but for your son, your husband, like how is everyone reacting to this way of life that's very different?
It is so different. It's been amazing for our family time. Like my children have never spent so much time with my husband before, and it's so good for them and so good for him and so good for me. And it's not like perfect all the time. We do get annoyed. He's really annoying sometimes.
I get it. I have a husband too.
As all husbands are. Anyway, I love him.
Oh, yeah, there's that saying.
And it's been an incredible transformation in our family life. I mean, just first of all, the amount of time we spend together, but just what happens, now we're all just so capable. We're a family who live in a city. He works a lot. He's an osteopath. He sees patients all day long, has a short lunch break, and comes home maybe with enough time to see the baby just for a little bit before she goes to bed. But that's a challenge as well, because if he comes home 20 minutes before she goes to sleep, as I'm sure other parents know, that's really hard for a young child, because they get really excited and then they can't go to sleep 20 minutes after their dad gets home.
Yeah.
So we have to manage that. And sometimes it's better for him to come back home just after she's gone to sleep so that she can go to sleep easily. And then he misses her altogether. And our 11-year-old is older, so he sees him pretty much every night because he's up till 9. So that once they're older, it's different. But it's a really limited amount of time that he spends with our children. And then me, I have a much freer schedule during the day, but then I travel also. So then I might be gone for 2 days every 2 weeks, or 2 days a week sometimes. And then that's that. So we're both experiencing this amazing time of spending all the time with our children without a nanny, because we have a nanny in London as well. And you become a very capable parent. We now know how to keep the schedule going perfectly all day. Perfectly is an overstatement. We know we've got the routine down. We do sometimes modify it, but it's really good for parents who don't normally take care of their children all the time to do this. I think we do it on the weekends, and we've had this policy in our family for a long time that we don't have a nanny on the weekends, because it's really important for us to know how to look after our kids. And on holidays, we don't have nannies. So we did it. It's not like a full shocker, but it's also, we're week 5 or 6 now, I think, of this. And it's a long time to be doing this. And I think I'm waffling a bit here. I love it. I love looking after my children. It's so nice. It's so hard sometimes. And we feel like we've gotten almost nothing else done. Like, it's weird how we have almost zero plans every day. Like, I do a little webinar once in a while, or an Instagram live, but we have almost nothing in our calendars. And yet every night we're like, gosh, I got nothing done. I'm exhausted. How are we so busy and getting nothing done? It's children.
I know. It's so funny. I feel like my friends who have babies are all going through the same thing, but they're also saying very similarly to you that our lives have sort of been taken back to very simple times, the times before we all traveled a ton for work, or, the working day. I mean, I think back, I don't have kids, but like my schedule before this all went down, I mean, I was waking up at 7 a.m., going straight onto my laptop, working a full day, getting in a workout class, then either seeing my friends or going to a work event that night. So there were, days where I would spend 12 to 16 hours, solely on Regenerative, and I just feel like my stress levels are down. I'm also running my business better. I think that's something I've really noticed. Like, I'm actually doing a better job now with a bit of time and self-care than I probably was 3 months ago.
I love hearing that. That's so interesting. I hope that all professionals realize this, that actually we need to schedule in more time for rest, because when you rest, you rejuvenate. Like, take sleep as the kind of analogy of that. How would we be if we all didn't sleep because we were trying to get so much done? We'd obviously get far less done because we'd be zombies. And that just goes for the rhythm of the day as well. You need little respite breaks in order to then to sit back and think about it. One of my best friends has a company called Juice Lab in Paris, which is a juice company. And she's loving this moment. She's like, wow, I've had to close all my stores, which means I don't have to deal with any employees, which means I don't have to deal with like taking care of so many other people. And I can just focus on my own business issues. And she's restructuring and re-strategizing. And she's just like, this has been an amazing time.
Yeah, I think with that, it comes to me this word of like reflection, like having time to sort of reflect on like what the right decisions to make are, because I think that only comes with a certain amount of slowness, because if you're going so fast, you can't really make great decisions. And it's something I actually want to get into with you in a bit, because I want to talk about how we move forward and we don't lose, like you and I both seem to be in fortunate positions where, you know, like we, like our jobs are just to be the best versions of ourselves right now. And, you know, we're not on the front line working or doing anything like that. But kind of going back to this farming, because it's something that I think we actually share quite a passion for, even though it can seem very unsexy. It is sexy.
Are you a secret farmer as well?
Well, I grew up in the countryside in Maine, and actually, I don't know if I ever told you this, but my mom owns a garden center and my dad owns a landscaping company. So,
oh my gosh, no, I didn't realize that you were so like, you grew up growing plants.
I did. And it's really interesting because I remember when I first started REV, like going home to Maine and being so stressed out and so overwhelmed. My mom would always like plop me in the garden and she'd tell me to like go weed or go plant something. And I remember feeling completely at ease again. And my parents also were very, probably ahead of their time, because they never used pesticides, they never used fertilizers, they only did natural ways of doing things, and that's always been their company ethos. So going back to this thing of regenerative biodynamic farming, for people that maybe aren't so familiar, Arizona, can you just kind of give us like a brief 101 on what that means and why it's so important?
Yes. Yeah. So regenerative farming is many different types of farming: permaculture, biodynamic, regenerative, organic, that are actually looking at the soil and saying the soil is the center of what we do. If it's healthy, our plants will be healthy, our animals will be healthy. And you don't necessarily have to eat the animals. So regenerative agriculture needs animals as a part of it because of the manure, because of the hooves, because of the way animals work with nature, but you don't need to eat them in order to raise them. That's absolutely fine. So it's vegan friendly. It can be a vegan friendly farm with cows on it. Like that's beautiful, and that you can definitely do. You don't have to milk them even. You can just have cows pooping on your farm. That's all you need. So biodynamic specifically is the one that I focus on because I just love it, and I go and volunteer on biodynamic farms. And what biodynamic farming is a type of farming that includes cows but cows are just the best of all the ruminants. So all the sheep or goats or any kind of other animal like that is also really helpful in regenerative, but cows are the best because they're the biggest, and they have the 4 stomachs, and they just have this cycle that they're kind of magic, actually, cows. The more I learn about them, the more complex they become. And I realize they're so intricate, these beings, and they're not simple at all. And we've really underestimated and undervalued cows. What cows do is they eat grass, and then their body designs a manure that has all the nutrients that the grass was missing, so that once the manure goes on that soil, the next generation of grass is going to be even more nutrient rich for the cows. So these cows are literally like custom making a manure for your farm. It's just incredible. So you need them. And then I know, they're amazing. And then you need compost. So compost is also the central, cows and compost, because the manure is a big part of the compost, are the central piece of a biodynamic farm. And then you're also making these things called preparations, which are tinctures that you ferment and you make with different ingredients on the farm, like mineral ingredients, plant ingredients, like chamomile or silica. And they have very specific directions on how to make them. And then you bury them underground to ferment them for half a year, something like that. And they're all specific and different. That's why I'm using kind of general examples from some of them. And then you dig out the ingredients that have changed. They've become this like rich, humusy, very dark, very earthy smelling, but good smelling. They don't smell like something rotten. Like they smell really quite fresh and intense. And then you mix that ingredient in with water and you stir it. And the stirring is like a practice. So it's kind of like yoga, but in your mind, for setting your intention for that preparation. That preparation is going to go onto your land. It's going to make it more healthy, more vital. It's going to increase the vital forces of your land, basically, and of the plants and animals and you who live on that land. So this is why the biodynamic food is the most richly nutritious food that is available anywhere. And that goes for fibers too, because fibers like wool or skins or flax or hemp or cotton, they all carry in them the vitality of the plant. So we can be wearing fibers that are actually like richly filled with life, I guess is how you can describe it. This is not a biodynamic jumper I'm wearing. I'm just using it as an example. But I like to imagine a world where all agriculture is biodynamic, so that we're all eating food that really stimulates our minds and bodies to be as healthy as possible. And also wearing fabrics that are having a positive impact on the environment because they were grown biodynamically. This would just be, if we were doing this, we wouldn't be talking about climate change. It wouldn't be a problem. The earth would have rebalanced itself. This is what it needs, is to have biodynamic farming on its whole surface. We're using these preparations to rebalance the earth's energies. It's so complex in such an incredible way, an intricate way, just the way nature is. Nature is, the more I learn about nature and the more time I spend in nature and studying it like looking at it and walking in it and noticing it, and my senses are all just changing. Like it's amazing. What I used to kind of go on a walk through the English countryside and think, oh, it's all green. And now I go on a walk and I think, oh, look at all these thousands of different kinds of plants and insects and the different bird songs that I'm hearing. And oh, this soil is more moist than this one over here. And it's like I'm learning this new language, and now I can actually hear and understand nature in a different way. And it's been an amazing experience. I highly recommend doing this.
Well, I think, and we can talk about sort of how you've done it, so people, if they're interested, could learn too. But just going back to this question of biodynamics, so two things. First of all, can you tell us sort of the differences between if you were to eat, so say you were eating a piece of kale and one was, grown biodynamically, organically, naturally, and then there was a kale that had been, more conventionally farmed using pesticides, wrapped in plastic, maybe shipped from a faraway European country or South America. What would the nutritional value, what would the differences be? Not just the carbon footprint, but, for us as we're eating, what's the difference to our bodies, if that makes sense?
So you sound like Zach Bush, by the way, who I know is a mutual hero of ours. We love him. Listen to the podcast on Goop, where he explains all of this beautifully, way more eloquently than I'm about to, but I'll try. So a plant of kale that is growing in, let's take hydroponic growing as an example, because that's kind of the extreme of it's healthy. It's often reduces the amount of chemicals that you use drastically and the amount of water, but those plants aren't grown in soil. They're grown on shelves in trays of water with sometimes some coconut coir, the like fibrous coconut part, to kind of give the roots some stability, but it's not nutritional. So they're not grown in soil. They do have a high nutritional content, like that's been measured. It's highly scientific now, that people who are putting money and effort into vertical farming, and it does seem like it holds a lot of positives. Like the biggest one I see for vertical farming is the transport. If each restaurant had a vertical farm outside and they were growing their own vegetables, you would reduce the amount of transport for food tremendously, which would have a very positive effect on the environment. However, that food might not be as richly full of vitality compared to nutrition, because nutritional content might be the same. It might have the same vitamins and minerals, but it definitely won't have the same vitality. And vitality comes from the living soil. Remember at the beginning, we talked about how dead soil is so it's different than living soil. Living soil is full of life, and the plant is taking the life from the soil and using it to create itself, also carbon, and it's transferring sugars back and forth from the fungi and other things that live in the soil. It's a really complex situation how plants grow out of soil. So kale that's grown from richly nutritious biodynamic soil with compost on it is going to have life forces in it that are so strong. People who eat biodynamic food I find that you end up eating a lot less of it because it's so dense in like life that you just feel fuller sooner. and it lasts you longer, and you're like, this is weird. I just ate zucchinis. Like, how are they supporting me for so much longer? But they are, because they're so full of life themselves. On the contrary, when I eat, cheap food that I know has been grown the wrong way, especially meat, you need more of it. You have that insatiable feeling of like, oh, I just need more. I know I don't want more. I know it's not good for me. I know I'm not hungry, but I need more. And then you just eat too much, and then you feel guilty and badly about yourself. And I think a lot of that has to do with the food we're eating doesn't have enough vital forces, and our own vital life forces sense that. And so they're constantly like, I'm hungry, I'm starving, I need more, even though I'm full of food. And so we need to just really examine this, and how can we be eating food that is richly nutritious? And here comes the topic of equality. Deserves. This should not be a price, a cost issue. Why is it that someone who can afford more expensive food is going to get better quality nutrition and therefore better health? Like, how is that okay in society? We're all humans. We all deserve excellent health and excellent food. So I really, really want farming to become kind of front and center in our focus over the next few years, about where are our values as humanity, as a population on Earth. Do we value getting stuff to people? Is it important to manufacture low cost stuff that people can buy at low cost, or is it way more important that we reduce the amount of things we need in our lives and replace those things with really richly nutritious food that can then support our mental function and physical function, so that we can be the humans that we need to be?
Yeah. And it's so interesting. And I know that we both grew up in the States. So I think you would know what I'm talking about when I say that you're very much on your own with the American healthcare system. And when I was growing up, and we're seeing that now incredibly, but when I was growing up, my mom always shopped at the farmer's market. We always ate organic, and it was expensive, but she always said that was our healthcare. Like, she was putting money into this food because she believed that was our healthcare, more than, going and getting prescription medicine or spending lots of money going to the doctors. Obviously, like when my appendix ruptured and stuff, you go to the doctor, but for just the day-to-day
Oh yeah,
stuff.
we're so great. Even people who are into alternative medicine, we're still so grateful that hospitals exist. I mean, it's amazing. Modern healthcare is incredible, and let's acknowledge that and be grateful for it. But also, let's not abuse that system. Let's not use it unless we absolutely need to. Like, a ruptured appendix is a great time to go to a hospital. A cold, not so much.
Well, exactly, and I think it is really interesting, and it is so much a question of equality. And I think also by people that maybe can afford to shop organic or biodynamic and support that way of farming, if you're able to make that decision, would you say it's an important one to make? Because there will be a trickle down effect where, if we can kind of invest in these more biodynamic ways of eating, eventually that will have an effect on others, because it will mean there will be more demand, and it will mean that prices will go down of this sort of farming.
Very important. I think that if you can afford it, it's your responsibility to buy things that are sustainable, whether it's food or fashion, and that are slightly more expensive, because you are so privileged to have an expendable income that you can make that choice. People who cannot afford it, I would never want anyone to feel like guilty that they couldn't afford organic food. That's a systems problem. That's not your fault. And we need to change the system. And food also got way too cheap. It's crazy, the price of meat. Those were animals. Those were real animals who had a life, and now we're selling them for under a pound to get pork. It's just like, when you think about it that way, it's really disgusting. It's so disrespectful to that living being who lived and had a probably treacherous life and miserable. And yeah, it's a huge problem.
Yeah, it's like if you're going to eat an animal product, I think that they're just, it's like when you see, I mean, we live in Hackney, and oftentimes I'll walk around after a Friday or Saturday night, and like you'll just see half-eaten chicken like on the street, and I always really struggle with that too. Or when you see kids and they're only eating, and I know it's hard to get kids to eat stuff, but they're only eating like a quarter of something, and then you just a lot of times just throw that away. And I struggle with this too, because I'm very very sympathetic to animals, and it does seem, just because things are so cheap, that we're not valuing what you say very rightly was a life. Anyway, I could talk about.
And also food waste. I mean, food waste itself is not a problem as long as food waste is going directly onto a compost pile and being turned into food for the organisms in the compost pile and in soil. Then it's like, oh, you're feeding something else. You're feeding other mouths with it. So food waste isn't such a problem, but it is the way we have it right now. We don't have an infrastructure to collect compost, which to me is absolutely nuts. How is it that cities have gotten to 2020 without collecting people's food waste? From supermarkets, it's more difficult because it's all wrapped in plastic. That's obviously a big problem. And for the food, a lot of people will argue, yeah, but if it weren't wrapped in plastic, you'd have way more food waste. And I'd like to argue that we should never wrap food in plastic, and that we should just change the way we ship it and the life expectation on the food. Like if we expect it to live for 3 weeks, okay, you're going to have to wrap it in plastic. But if we have a system that's much shorter, the supply chain is much shorter, then you expect food to live only for maybe 4 days after it's been picked, which means it's much more full of life forces for the people who are going to eat it. I don't really want to eat something that's been in a plastic bag for 2 weeks before I eat it. Like that's just not really. And food waste, if we all had compost bins, and if that were all being collected and put onto a compost pile and making food for farms, for the soil of farms, then that's a really great system, and you wouldn't need to feel badly about wasting food. So it's just, we need to rethink the whole system and value food even when it's being wasted, because it's not just nothing. Whereas when it goes into the trash and then it goes into the landfill, it's in an anaerobic environment, it doesn't have any oxygen, and it will turn directly into greenhouse gases. Yay, where are those?
Well, and that was something I wanted to go back to too, Arizona, is kind of, you mentioned that if we were doing biodynamic farming entirely, we wouldn't have to worry so much about climate change. But something that I've noticed, just like being in the middle of London, is, I mean, I've never seen clear air like this. I've never seen, I like, honestly, babe, if you were here, you'd be like, what is going on? I mean, I'm hearing birds, I am seeing animals running around, I can breathe properly. Like, I never used to run in London, and now I'm going running because it doesn't feel like I'm doing something bad for my body. And I'm very, very concerned about everything just going back to normal in a few months. And in fact, our carbon spiking because, people are going to try and reboot infrastructure so drastically. And, I think it's so important for us to talk about individual responsibility for not going back to the way that things were. And also, how we can all kind of be doing a bit better. So I wanted to just touch upon this. Obviously, eating a more sustainable way is something all of us can do, every single one of us. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we could all approach that a little bit. If not all of us can move to a farm or spend more time in nature, are there any kind of simple like hacks that you've got for people that do want to make some sort of an effort?
Yeah, actually, I love that question. One thing that I've done recently, like in the last kind of 6 months, I started doing this because I was feeling starved for nature, and I was reading so much about nature, and had just finished reading The Nature Fix, and also read Braiding Sweetgrass, which is a beautiful book.
Oh my God,
Robin Walker. I love her so much. Oh, she's amazing.
Yeah.
Also, The Hidden Life of Trees by Peter Wohlleben. Oh, all these books are just magnificent, and they make you feel so good. It's like a breath of clean, fresh air as you read them, or I listen to them. I love audiobooks, so I listen to them. And one thing that I started doing as a little life hack is in England, it's very moist, so I can find moss everywhere. Turns out it's on every post, it's on every wall, it's in between the cracks of the pavement. Like, I didn't really notice it before at all, but once I started looking for it, it's everywhere. And I'll spend, as I'm walking through London on my day, whatever I'm doing, I'll just stop for like 25 seconds, that's it, and just have a look at the moss and like inspect it and look at all the colors. And it turns out moss is never one green, it's many greens, and it isn't all the same height, it's all different heights, and it's got little things coming out of it. And I was just like, whoa, this is actually like a meditation in a way that anyone can fit into their day. 25 seconds, 45 seconds, it's not a long time. It's changed my life. In the last 6 months, I now have all these memories of moss. Like, this is so sweet. I'm actually filling my brain with all these mini little plants, but I haven't even like changed my day, because I used to think, oh, I can't get into nature, it's like a 2-hour train journey, and then I have to take snacks and water, and then it's a whole day, and I don't have that because my son has football on the weekends. And then, but actually nature can come into your life in really minuscule ways and make a grand difference.
And I think it is, you know, how do we begin to like fix nature if we don't?
Another life hack.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I was kind of thinking about is if, you know, well, I guess it's a question I've got. I don't even know if you guys know, but what are you thinking about, like, when we kind of are allowed to go back, you know, how are you and Boniface thinking about what the new normal is going to look like for you? You know, everybody's talking about this now, like the new normal, the new normal. Do you think that you'll spend more time on farms? Do you think that you'll think about moving to the country permanently? Like, how are you approaching the future, I guess?
I mean, we're really excited to return home to our normal life, because we do love our life there. We're really happy in London. We have amazing friends. It's been hard not to see friends. And Boniface, my husband, is an osteopath, and his patients he feels great loyalty to, and he's really looking forward to going back to his work, which he loves. And it's going to be tricky to, like, how do we hold this time with us and really make sure that we do make changes? We already were trying to be as sustainable as possible and reduce the amount of plastic in our home by a lot, which is possible, and we've done it, and it feels great. All of our cleaning supplies are as natural as possible, and they're using vinegar and baking soda for most things, which clean really, really well. And, you know, all of those little changes that you can do at home, and buying food in a very conscious way. But I mean, part of me really just wants to go and live on a farm, because this is so nice here. It's so nice. It's so nice for our kids. It's so nice for us. So we'll see. I mean, we'll see if that, maybe, I always thought that I would probably end up on a farm when I was in my 60s, but maybe that'll happen sooner.
You don't know. I mean, anything is possible. And I think I want to get into a little bit about the fashion industry, obviously, because it's such a huge part of your life in a way. But just as like an interim, I mean, this is something I'm really interested in, is travel and our carbon footprints on the other side of this. So like for me, looking at this air and how everything is cleaner, and I mean, like looking at the pollution levels just dropping, I've been thinking a lot about, like, am I going to fly after this? You know, am I going to take Ubers? Like, those were the things I was probably most guilty of in terms of my footprint. And I'm just asking people, zero judgment, but like, is it crossing your mind how, if you want to change anything like that, or is it something where you're like, it's a part of life that is just inevitable, that we have to get around, and, you know, we need to see the world?
Very much, it's on my mind. Just before the virus really took place in Europe, we were on holiday, and we had booked this holiday a really long time ago, like nearly a year before. And so this was the last week of February, and we went to the Dominican Republic, and it was beautiful, of course, it's gorgeous there. But the whole week we were there, I was thinking to myself, is this worth it? We've just come to sit on a beach. We flew here. Is it worth it? Did we need to do this? And it just, to me, the answer was no. And I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to just fly just for a holiday to go somewhere remote and far away, a long haul flight. I think that travel, I'm going to reserve it for really special learning occasions. Like if I plan a holiday for us where we go to Ecuador and we do a like hike into the rainforest and sleep outdoors and have guides who open our minds up to like what nature is there and how the biodiversity works, that to me, I would feel like that's worth it. That's really incredible as an experience. It also helps to, as if we're all doing that as humans, learning about other biodiversities in other places, that's going to help our collective love for and appreciation for nature. So I think that that kind of travel is probably still worth it and a privilege, and we should be grateful for. Definitely shipping things around should stop. No object deserves the pleasure of flying around the earth, because it doesn't matter. They don't care. Like broccoli doesn't go, wee, I've gone on a trip. Just like, only buy your broccoli locally, please.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, flying. And already, because of my kids, I've already reduced my work travel as much as possible. Whenever I get an option for a shoot, I always start by saying, do you think you could shoot that in London? So it's always like, I'm always trying to advocate local shoots in studios rather than going on some fancy location destination somewhere else. And so that's already happening. I'm very careful about which work I pick. I do think at the moment it's still really important that I model. This career is giving me the platform to talk about all the things I'm passionate about, which is nature and climate change and sustainability. And it's still valuable for me to be on a shoot with these brands. I'm there with the CEO and the head designer, and guess what I'm doing all day? About sustainability and how great it is and how enthusiastic I am about it. And I think that really is making a difference. And so at the moment, it's still really important that I do that, even though that does mean that I fly places sometimes. And it's wasteful. I know it's wasteful, and I'm encouraging companies to carbon offset. Carbon offsetting is not as if it's like the solution or anything. It's a like a little band-aid, but it's better to put the band-aid on than not to use it at all. Well, so it's something that I'm definitely considering.
And I think, I think that is a wonderful answer, because a realistic answer too. We're all not going to never get on flights again, but it's exactly how I feel about travel. And also, we're lucky enough to live in Europe. Like something I was talking about with my friends, like there are trains, like we are lucky enough to live somewhere where if we really need to go somewhere, you can go on a train. And I'm actually a very nervous flyer anyway, so I'm thrilled if I get to take a train anywhere. So that I think is an interesting kind of way to move forward too. So then this is kind of nicely segueing into like kind of my last topic I want to go over with you, which is the fashion industry. And you touched upon it before. I think we're seeing how these huge supply chains that are all over the world with no accountability for their workforce or the actual people that huge companies are employing. We are seeing how deeply flawed that is now, I think more than ever. I feel like a lot of us knew what was going on behind the scenes, but we are now seeing the devastation that is happening as big companies are not even paying for orders, as people are losing their livelihoods, which were, I mean, let's face it, grim anyway, and just fantastically underpaid. So you've been kind of part of this pay up movement, and I'd love for you to speak a little bit about what that is for people who might not know, and why it's so important to call for accountability within fashion.
I'd like to draw to attention that the excuse that big brands used to hide behind for the kind of low working conditions, low pay, they used to say, yeah, but at least we're providing jobs for people who would have nothing otherwise. And now, when they refuse to pay for orders, and then when they cancel new orders, they are doing they're living into what their excuse was, that they were protecting these people from nothing. So now they're cutting the cord and they're leaving these people with, as they, in their own words, absolutely nothing, which is just like, how can you do that? How can you live with yourself and do this? So I'm really disgraced at the behavior of the fashion industry, big multi-billion-dollar brands who are clearly just worrying about things closer to home I mean, that's where travel is really useful. Let's send all the CEOs and all the top stakeholders to the supply chains. They need to see this. That is worth a flight. If that you go and see this and you look these people in the eye and you meet their families and you see the conditions in which their children are living, you will come home and make some different decisions. So let's do that. Let's use these flights that we've all saved during this time to send the right people to see the right things, to then make the right decisions. It's about transparency here, especially on the human level, on the environmental level as well. I mean, it's just such a devastating industry when it comes to misuse and abuse of natural resources. We don't know whether it's the most or second most polluting or third most polluting, but it is, I would say, the biggest misuse and abuse of natural resources: metals, fabrics, chemicals. This is all industries: fashion, packaging, transport. It's everything. Dyes. I mean, it's just all materials, skins, feathers, everything. Absolutely everything that you could possibly use has been used on clothing. Embellishments, crystals, sequins from plastic. It is everything. So I really hope that this is going to change. I hope that brands will have the dignity to pay the bottom of their supply chain first, even if it means bankruptcy up here. Like, they deserve that. The supply chain deserves that. They've been supporting you so you can make all these huge profits for the last 45 years as an industry.
Yeah.
More really, but really huge profits in the last 15, 20 years. You deserve it to then pay down your supply chain, even if it means you have nothing left afterwards. Just please do that. Like, make a good story, be a good person, and just do it, is what the message I would like to send to all these big brands. And yes, it is going to be hard to lay off your workers at this end of the supply chain, the ones who work in the department stores in New York, and the ones who, I understand there are humans involved at every stage of the supply chain, but these humans over here, they really need it more. They really do.
So I completely agree with you about everything you just said. It's just, I guess, seeing certain individuals who are owning huge fashion brands that are asking for taxpayer bailout money. It doesn't seem like they're probably asking for that money to then go and give it to their workers in Southeast Asia, if I had to guess. And if that's the case, is it then more the responsibility of the consumer to just stop shopping at those brands? Or is it always going to come back to the CEOs and the people at the top of the supply chain to better their acts? Like, I guess, where do you think the responsibility lies, really?
I think it's twofold. The responsibility lies, of course, with the consumer. And as a consumer, never underestimate your power. Every time you make a purchase, you're making a choice, and you're supporting either a brand who's doing a good thing or a brand who's doing a bad thing. And both of them really care whether or not you support them. The brand who's often little, who's doing the right thing, it means the world to them to gain a new customer. So don't tread lightly where you spend your money. And I also think it's a systems problem. Why do we have this system where there's no accountability? Why is it that if your business goes bankrupt, you're not personally liable? That's what a limited liability company is. So these people, of course, it's stressful when your company goes under, but they're not personally actually liable for the company. And that's where things get really scary. Because if you were liable for your company, you would, make a much better product, because if people came back to you and it were your fault that their product had broken or polluted the earth, you would think much more strongly about how you created it. Also, you wouldn't go into so much debt. You wouldn't finance out so much on a business if it actually meant that you would owe that debt for the rest of your life until you repaid it. I think that accountability is the word we need to talk about. What does it mean to be accountable? And does our system allow accountability? I don't think it does. I don't think that companies have any accountability because their owners are not accountable for them. So how could you possibly feel accountability down the supply chain if there literally isn't any?
Yeah, it's a hugely good point, and I could talk to you about it, I'm sure, for the rest of the day, but I know you need to get back to your babies. So let's just kind of end with people knowing that I love how you said, you know, don't ever underestimate your power as a consumer. I think that we all need to be really, really aware of that. And I think actually it goes really well into my last question, which is, you know, for you as an individual, what is like the biggest thing you want to take with you from the other side, like to the other side of this? As you know, I know you were already a very sustainable person. I know you're already being a spokesperson for sustainability, but is there something that you're like, I want to continue this, I want to be better with this, and I want to take this forward to be more of a positive impact in the world?
To me, it's farming. I want to take with me this desire to support farming, to nurture it, the farmers, the soil, the community around farming, the plants, the animals. I really want to change the system. I don't want factory farming to exist anymore. It's horrible. It's horrible for the people who work in factory farms. It's horrible for the animals who are abused. I mean, it's just, as I said, I'm listening to Sapiens right now, and there's a great moment in there where he says, potentially factory farming and just domestication of animals might be seen as the biggest injustice humanity has ever committed. And that's powerful. That's like, wow, yeah. If we were in a court right now, and as humanity being taken to court for the way we've treated animals, these other living beings, I mean, it's just, when you think about it, we all deserve to go to prison forever. Not that I think prisons should exist either. I think going to prison and punishing people in that way for bad behavior is never going to work. And I think there should be definitely a different system of reteaching. Because if someone's behaving badly, it's like a child. They behave badly when either their environment isn't right and isn't producing good behavior from them, or they've been taught something wrong. They've been taught to behave badly by either unconsciously by their parents behaving badly as well, or just by this system. And right now our system is teaching us to behave badly. So, but punishing people by putting them indoors away from nature and in a horrible situation with poor nutrition isn't going to change them into behaving better afterwards. It just isn't. And we see that. We know it doesn't. I mean, psychologists who are way cleverer than I am know that. So I hope the whole thing changes. That's what I'm taking with me, is we need to change it all. So let's do it now.
Okay. Oh my God, well, we could not end on a better note. And thank you. That is so much food for thought. Well, thank you so much, Arizona, and take care.
So nice to see you. You too.